Revenge doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it's not the slam of a gavel or the blast of a headline, but a single choice, a simple word that carries more weight than an entire press conference. For Caitlin Clark, revenge wasn't about firing shots on social media or throwing shade in interviews. It wasn't about clapbacks, rants, or headlines. Her revenge was devastatingly simple. She said no. No to Gino Auriemma. No to UConn's legacy. No to the $1 million offer that came crawling back years later. On paper, it looked absurd. Who walks away from over $1 million for just 8 weeks of basketball? Who turns down a chance to dominate in a brand new league with massive funding behind it? But this wasn't just a contract. This wasn't just about money. It was about power, respect, and principle. The offer was more than a paycheck. It was the lifeline of a man who once dismissed her, belittled her, and treated her like an afterthought. And when Clark rejected it, she didn't just pass on 7 figures. She humbled the man who never thought he could be humbled. This story begins years before the WNBA, before Rookie of the Year trophies, before sold-out arenas and record-shattering TV ratings. It begins when Caitlin Clark was just a teenager with a dream. For a kid growing up in Iowa, UConn was the mountaintop. It was the dynasty. It was the empire. The home of Diana Taurasi, Maya Moore, Breanna Stewart, legends carved into the very fabric of women's basketball. To Clark, it was the coolest place on earth, the dream destination for the game's brightest stars. But when recruiting season came, the call never came with it. Geno Auriemma never picked up the phone. Never called Clark, never called her parents. Barely even sent a message through her AAU coach. For the self-proclaimed greatest recruiter in the history of the sport, that silence was deafening. And it wasn't an accident. It was a choice. His reasoning was simple. UConn had already locked in Paige Bueckers. They didn't want 2-point guards. On the surface, that sounded reasonable. But then came the arrogance. Auriemma suggested that if Clark really wanted UConn, she should have called him. Think about that. The man who built his empire on identifying once-in-a-generation talent before anyone else decided Caitlin Clark wasn't worth his time, then blamed a teenager for not chasing him. That wasn't just a recruiting miss. That was disrespect. And Clark never forgot it. Instead of begging for UConn's approval, she chose Iowa, a program without banners, without mystique, without dynasty glow. To outsiders, it looked like settling. To Clark, it was liberation. At Iowa, she wasn't Paige's shadow. She wasn't Gino's afterthought. She was the priority, the centerpiece, the face of the program. And from the moment she put on that black and gold jersey, she rewrote the script. Her logo threes weren't just shots. They were statements. Her sold-out arenas weren't just crowds. They were proof. Her record TV ratings weren't flukes. They were receipts. Every basket, every highlight, every shattered record was a reminder. You missed this. But Gino didn't humble himself. He doubled down on arrogance. He brushed her off in interviews with sly digs, calling her a kid playing like she's in the driveway. He tethered her rise to Paige Bueckers, constantly drawing comparisons, as if Clark's brilliance couldn't stand alone. And when her fan base exploded, when millions of new eyes tuned into women's basketball, Gino sneered at them too. During an interview in June 2024, he crossed a line he could never walk back. He called her fans delusional. He said they were clueless. He claimed their belief in Clark was damaging to women's basketball. Imagine that. Families buying jerseys, kids camping outside arenas, new fans watching the WNBA for the first time, and Gino's response was to mock them. He wasn't just dismissing Clark. He was dismissing the very people who had dragged the sport into the mainstream. But here's where the poetry kicked in. Clark didn't argue. She didn't clap back. She didn't even address him. She let the court do the talking. And the results were brutal. Rookie of the Year. All WNBA first team. And when the MVP votes were tallied, she finished 4th. Exactly where her so-called delusional fans predicted she'd finish. The very outcome Gino mocked became reality. Clark didn't just prove him wrong, she proved her fans right, vindicating every single person he insulted. And she did it all without saying his name. Silent revenge. By then, Gino was unraveling. His digs grew sharper, his interviews more desperate. He couldn't let go. He kept trying to claw back relevance, trying to tie Clark's rise to his own legacy. But the more he spoke, the more obvious it became. She wasn't just rewriting record books. She was living rent-free in his head, and then came the pivot. If words couldn't control the narrative, maybe money could. That's when the $1 million offer appeared. Backed by stars like Breanna Stewart and Nafisa Collier, Unrivaled, a new 3-on-3 women's league, wanted Clark to be its face. Reports confirmed the league offered her over $1 million for an 8-week season, one of the richest contracts ever presented in women's basketball. But behind the curtain, one of its investors was none other than Gino Auriemma. The irony was staggering. The man who once ignored her calls was now practically begging for her to save his project. The same man who dismissed her hype now wanted to monetize it. The same man who called her fans clueless now needed those same fans to stream his games and buy his tickets. It wasn't just business. It was desperation, but Clark saw it for what it was. She didn't see opportunity. She saw arrogance dressed as generosity. She saw the same man who once minimized her trying to reclaim power through her name. And she didn't hesitate. She didn't negotiate. She didn't explain. She simply said no. That one word carried more weight than any slam dunk of revenge ever could. No interviews, no social media rants, no victory laps. Just rejection. And in that silence, Gino's humiliation was complete. The gatekeeper who built his reputation on spotting and molding talent had been reduced to offering a fortune to the one player he once dismissed. And she turned him down flat. The fallout was immediate. Without Clark, Unrivaled lost its magnet, its credibility, its centerpiece. The $1 million offer stopped looking like power and started looking like weakness. Fans laughed. Social media clowned Gino relentlessly. The man who once acted as the gatekeeper of women's basketball now looked like a desperate figure begging for relevance. And Clark? She didn't even blink. She just kept moving forward, her empire growing without him, her influence spreading further with every game, every broadcast, every endorsement. Her rejection wasn't just personal revenge, it was cultural. It marked the end of the old guard's control. For decades, coaches like Gino decided who mattered. They controlled the narratives, the pathways, the opportunities. But Clark shattered that model. She proved that the future belongs to the players, not the gatekeepers. His greatest mistake wasn't ignoring her as a recruit. His greatest mistake was believing the sport couldn't grow without him. He thought he was indispensable. She proved he was irrelevant. Her no wasn't just rejection, it was revolution. Caitlin Clark didn't just dethrone Geno Auriemma. She torched the throne, and she did it without shouting, without screaming, without even looking back. Her revenge wasn't loud. It was quiet, calm, and devastating. One word was all it took to end an empire. So now the question is yours. Do you think Geno Auriemma got what he deserved? Was Clark's silent rejection the most powerful revenge women's basketball has ever seen? Drop your thoughts in the comments, smash that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next breakdown.